Hi folks, my name is Charles and I'm the host of Go-to-Market Hackers, the show where we go inside the minds of revenue architects, creating systems that deliver winning outcomes. So as a startup founder and GTM leader, what gets me excited is understanding how the best go-to-market teams are using AI to unlock massive growth. And I think one of the most overlooked channels for growth is also one of the most boring ones, SEO. And so in today's episode, I'm interviewing my friend Mehrab, who's the founder of SEOMode, to talk about SEO, AI search, and discuss practical ways you can leverage them to grow your business. All right, Mehrab, it's so good to see you again. Thanks for joining Go-to-Market Hackers. I obviously have a lot of respect for you, and we've worked together in the past. I really have been wanting to make an episode on GEO and AI search for a while as part of Go-to-Market Hackers, because it's, I think, such an important topic that we don't talk about a lot in the go-to-market motions. And in fact, where people typically start is they start with, cold outbound, hitting the phones or hitting the emails. And typically people wait to do, GEO and SEO. I think it's a mistake. I think, people should be investing a lot more upfront in these areas, which is why I wanted to have you today. So Mehrab, maybe before we get started and we dive into some of the things you want to share with us, maybe you can tell the audience about your background, how you got into this space, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, sure. Super glad to be here. Of course, I love what you're doing here. And I'm Mehrab. I'm running SEOMode, which is now an SEO agency. Initially, when we started, we were just in like a small, tiny SEO services, which we help with backlinks and products when they were launching. We helped them with getting the initial traffic, initial boost with some backlinks. But now we pivoted into a full SEO/GEO agency. And what you said about the go-to-market is, yeah, super on point. I 100% agree with that because like SEO and GEO is a game, especially SEO, that's going to take time. It's not something like ads or cold emails that you can instantly run and instantly see some results. It's going to take time. So one of my like codes that I always say to my clients is that SEO is a game that you have to start 5 days ago, not now, not 5 days later. It's something that you had to start like 5 days ago. And gladly, like right now with AI, Claude, and like all these agents, all these toolings, it's just way easier to either automate the like data finding or like monitoring or actually just some executing. In my opinion, it at least still needs some like execution and like manual checking.
Yeah.
But at the end, it's just way easier to do SEO and GEO now. And I'm super excited to talk about it.
Definitely. And I will say, so I agree with you that you should start SEO and GEO yesterday. And I think that's also one of the issues is people typically, they say, yeah, I'll start, tomorrow, I'll start next week, I'll start next month. And nobody ever gets to it. And then a year later, and you regret not, having started it, obviously. The other part that I feel is that the results are now can be seen much faster than maybe 2, 3 years ago, right? You could see results in a matter of weeks. And I think you'll show some examples of this later, which means that you can, even though maybe it's, as you said, it's not as quick as a cold email where you can get somebody responding instantly, you can still see results pay off fairly quickly. So that's, I think that's something that, we should all take into account when we think about how to strategize and how to plan our go-to-market dollars, so to speak. You know that Go-to-Market Hackers is all about going into the details and less talking and more showing. And so what you did for us today is you prepared essentially 5 hacks that you use in order to basically start, having an impact on GEO for the clients that you work with. And by the way, you didn't mention this in the introduction, but I know that you have a background as a software engineer. And so you have that hacker mindset that's at the core of you, which now I guess you use into, SEO and GEO. But yeah, very excited to go into those. Maybe you can share more about the first hack that you typically do with some of your clients to start seeing some good results on the GEO side.
Yeah, for sure. So what I like to start with for our clients or like any lead that comes to us is just figure out if SEO or GEO is a good channel or not. And the best way to do that is basically just looking at if like is there any prompt that you can target. So let me just share my screen real quick. Okay, so like just like SEO, when you are going to do GEO, your first step is to find the keywords or in GEO queries that your target audience is going to search. So my personal thing is that these queries need to have two important features. The first one is that it should trigger a search, which obviously means that there is a query that the LLM is deciding that it needs fresh data. And because it needs fresh data, it is triggering a search. And because it is triggering a search, you have a chance to being mentioned there. So, because as we know, it's really hard to get into training data. But if there is a query that is triggering a search and model is searching the internet, searching the browsers, to like searching the search engines to find some solutions, that's where you want to make sure you are getting mentioned. And the second feature is that you want to spend your money on queries that are commercial or transactional and has the like closest path to actually conversion. So what we do is like we skip all the informational contents, all the informational prompts or queries, and just focus on, let's say, 4, 5, or 10 to 20, depending on the niche and client and like how big they are, how big their solution or product is. We just focus on the like most bottom of funnel prompts here. So, and how we find and extract these prompts is really simple. I just create a tiny prompt here
Hmm.
that we give to Claude. I'm gonna copy and paste it here for you real quick. And I'm gonna provide you this prompt so you can share it with the audience as well. So this is the
That's
prompt
awesome.
basically. And the only thing you need to do is just paste your website here. So I'm gonna go with one of the tools we are building in the backend. It's not done yet. It's like in the building process, but SEOMCP.ai. So I just enter the website address here, and that's it. I just hit the send, wait for the CLUD to do its job,
So
open the website.
just to break it down. So first of all, really appreciate you sharing the prompt with the audience, and we'll definitely add them to the show notes. What this prompt does is essentially it asks Claude to break down specific high value prompts that the ICP. So it's gonna basically from the URL also identify what the ICP is and then decline different prompts for the different ICPs and personas. Is that it?
Yeah, exactly. It's gonna open your website. It's gonna open any page you have. It's gonna find, like in this case, you see it's open even our GitHub. And based on that, it's gonna figure out what's your ICP, what's your product, what's your offering, what's your solution.
Very
And
cool.
based on that, it's gonna create like few different prompts that, of course, like you don't need all of them, but you can like check each of them and select few of them to add to your tracking tool. So like from there, you add these tools to your tracking tool.
Got
Do you
it.
have any
So
questions?
so that makes sense. So I think you built your own tracking tool, but the point is you can use, whatever use it using, whether it's even, I think you can in Ahrefs, right? You can track. And so you just add those in there and then you just track how they're performing. Is
Yeah.
that accurate?
Yeah. Exactly, exactly. So we have our own tracking tool because, like, as you said, like I'm an engineer and I wanted to have everything in place for myself and like being able to like connect every data we have with our own agents. So for example, we have our own dashboard that we keep all our clients' information beside like all the backlinks we get them, beside the trackings for their keywords, for their prompts. And I wanted to be able to have an internal MCP server
Hmm.
that like give access to this data to like our own agents, but you can use any tracking tool. Like there is hundreds of them.
Yeah.
Ahrefs has a like free plan, I believe.
Yeah.
There's like other like generous tools that you can use. And like from there, I'm gonna just show you some tips on what prompts you want to choose.
Hmm.
So for example, this is one of the clients we've worked with, and you can see we just focus on like 4 core prompts to target. And the reason for that is we wanted to only target the high level prompts. Like we don't want to like be super specific, or like we don't want to go like super like in details for like any all the different variations that a user might ask, because of course it's going to be like a lot of different variations a user can ask a question.
Hmm.
And beside that, what I noticed with working with all these clients is that lots of the times users that find you through ChatGPT is not exactly typing these prompts. So like they are inside a conversation with their favorite LLM, either it's ChatGPT or Claude, and they're asking like, hey, how can I automate my SEO? And like Claude is giving them some answers, and in between that, it says like you can use an MCP server to like automate your keyword research. And user might be interested on, okay, like, so what are some good MCP servers, or like what is an MCP? And from there, Claude, ChatGPT, or all these other LLMs would then trigger a search, and that's where like they would use these kind of high-level prompts or high-level query fanouts in order to search. So that's why we want to make sure we are targeting, like we are tracking these high-level prompts, not exactly all the like different variations a user might ask or might go in order to get and find your brand. Is that
That
clear?
makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Great explanation.
Okay, so I'm gonna just, for example, copy this prompt. So for example, if we copy this prompt, this client, we stopped working with this client on like, I think on May, but I just ran the results today again to just make sure if we are still getting mentioned. Gladly we are. And I'm just gonna run this prompt to ChatGPT itself, because using ChatGPT, you can actually extract the queries that ChatGPT use in order to like use their own internal search engine, whether it's Bing or Google. They say it's Bing, and it makes sense. It's going to be Bing, but many data shows that they are using Google, so that's why I say whether it's Google or Bing. But yeah, so if you type your prompt and either these prompts that you
Yep.
found here, and what you can do here is just open the like inspect page,
Mhm.
and from here go to the network tab, and from here just refresh the page for one more time. Copy the ID in the URL, so everything after the slash is
Yep.
actually the ID of your conversation. We are just going to wait for this page to load. So once the page loads, what you can do is basically the conversation ID you copied, you can paste it here. We are looking for this request that is on the type fetch. You can just click here and like filter it out and just click here. And you would see basically the response that ChatGPT API is returning to us for this conversation. And there is like lots of data here. But what we are looking for is search model queries. So if you hit Control F and search this, you would see it here. And you can see the exact query that ChatGPT used to search their search engine in order to like find these results. So if we click on the sources, you can see like these are all the results it's found, and it found these results based by searching this query. So
Super interesting.
yeah, and what you can do with this query is basically you can use it in your guest posts. So one of the things we do is we use these exact queries either in the content or even sometimes exactly in the title. So we would publish a guest post like best tariff refund services for US, and like we just add some modifiers at the end of it, like 2026 reviews, something like that.
Yep.
Or you can just publish it on your own blog post. So using the query, you would ask Claude to like, hey, write a listicle targeting this query and making sure like our brand is on the like first options. And if I want to show you some examples, so here are some backlinks we got for our client. You can see like some of the backlinks we got for them is the 5 best duty drawback services in 2026. Here we are trying to target the like top duty drawback companies or best companies to recover import duties from US.
That's amazing. So let me just make sure I get this right and I explain it to the audience. Basically, in the earlier basically prompt that you typed into ChatGPT, the results that were featured had a bunch of sources. In those
Yep.
sources, there are some of those backlink basically articles that you worked on for one of your clients, which is why it appeared here in the search or in the results of the ChatGPT query. Is that correct?
Yep.
Amazing.
For this response to be specific, it didn't had all the like any of the backlinks we got for them.
Hmm.
But if we come here, we have also all the responses we track, and that's why I say I like to like have it all in place in our own tracking tool.
Hmm.
So for example, if I open this prompt, best tariff refund services US, that was run on Perplexity, and we can see we got mentioned here. This is for today. And if we come here into the list of citations, so Zolback is our competitor, was one of the like backlinks we got. So we basically did a link exchange with them, but also you can see other backlinks we got for them. So here was another backlink and like another article from Zolback as well. So yeah, that's basically what you
Super
said.
interesting. And so when you do this process for different clients, you talked about this top level query, and then you have this query fan out where this is where you look at all the other queries that are connected to the initial query. And then what you do, I mean, for example, what you do in your tool is you're going to look at on an ongoing basis how often a specific client gets mentioned and within the responses of the different LLMs, Gemini, Claude, etc.
Indeed, indeed. Just like, to summarize everything,
Yep.
what we do is first we find all the like queries, the high level queries that this model is going to use. We track these queries because we don't know like each particular individual, how they are going to use their like favorite LLM in order to like ask a question and like find us. So what we are going to do is find these high level queries that we are going to find with this prompt, and we are
Yep.
going to track these high-level prompts or these high-level queries in your favorite tool. And from there, use many of these tools. They also like you don't have to do this manually, like
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
the like search model queries. So many of these tools, they actually give you the search queries. So let me see if we could find the search query here.
Yep.
Yeah, so for example, here, like in our own tool, like we extract that
That makes
um,
sense.
from the API. So then you use this in order to write your own articles and more importantly, write listicles or guest posts on third-party websites because the like amount of value that a third-party guest post can have in order to give you a brand mention is
Sure.
way, way more than just publishing a listicle on your own website and
For
just
sure.
mentioning your brand as the like first brand.
For sure. Makes sense. This is awesome. I love this example. Thank you for sharing this one. And it's great that you could put it in the context of one of the customers that you worked with. I think you mentioned that you had so much success that basically they were ranking, almost 100% of the time in geo
Yeah.
queries. So that's really an amazing, I guess, testament of the work you're doing.
Yeah. So for this particular client, like they were in a niche that it wasn't that crazy competitive, but like new competitors were coming up like every day. So it was competitive, but also like not really competitive. Like some niches like CRM, like CRM is super crazy to be
Sure.
in, right?
Yeah.
So we got super good results. We ranked them in the first month on like first 2 weeks in all the prompts that we've been tracking across all these like different models, except Claude. Claude is super hard to break in. Claude,
Right.
they are using Brave as their search engine, and it's just
Gotcha.
so hard to like get to Claude. But all these other models with just guest posts, Reddit, and your own blog post, you can get crack into with like within 2 to 3 weeks if you just target it, select a few prompts, and
And
just go for that.
that's super interesting. But so can you just explain just briefly for Claude, you're saying because they use Brave as their search engine, that
Yeah,
you're saying that it's much harder to, or it takes longer? I wasn't sure I understood. It takes longer to be able
yeah,
to identify the performance of your different campaigns?
yeah. So there is two issues with Claude. First is that it's not clear what queries they are using in order to search. So we can't do
Mm,
the same method that we just talked.
just went through. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the first issue. And the second issue is that they use Brave, and getting indexed on Brave is a little bit harder compared to Google and Bing. So
Right.
that also like makes the second issue. Like many of the
Got it.
links you get might not index or might not rank on the like top 10.
Got it. All right. Super interesting. And by the way, this is a bit of a side question, but do you recommend or do you focus on different, LLMs depending on like the customer you have? So in this case, it was for tax refunds. maybe the folks that look for tax refunds are more on, Gemini and ChatGPT, or actually Claude, maybe because it's a business type of query versus maybe ChatGPT is more for consumers, or do you just kind of like, have an umbrella approach where you just kind of want to have your bases covered across all those LLMs?
Yeah, so the way we work is we focus more on the prompts rather than the models. So
Got it.
for example, instead of focusing just on ChatGPT, we say like out of these 4 prompts, which of them are more important to us?
Got it.
And we just focus on that first, and from there we go to other prompts.
That
And
makes
that
sense.
seems been working like pretty fine. Because like Grok and Perplexity and Gemini, these are the 3 most easiest model to cracking. Then we have ChatGPT. It's like right in between. It's not that easy. It's not that hard. It's
Yep.
possible. And then we have AI overviews because like you have to rank on page 1 in
Right.
order to get into that. And after that, we have Claude, which is in my test the hardest one.
Got it. Super interesting. All right. This was the first great hack that you shared with us. Thank you, Merhab.
For
I know
sure.
you wanted to talk about also, how to use ChatGPT search queries, and I think some of the workflows like to generate content. Is that one of the things you want to do?
Yeah, so the next thing we can do is we can talk about our workflow to generate content.
Mhm.
So I just like use Cursor to like create these diagrams out of our exact code base on how we actually create content, create these blog posts, or create these guest posts, write the content for these guest posts. So many of SEOs think that you need to have a unique content, and they favor unique content, uniqueness of the content a lot in order to rank on page 1. But that's just simply not true. Many of the research shows that like even though like having a unique content is one of the signals, but it's not the most important signal or the like highest factor signals. There are like many other signals like your topical authority for a specific keyword, your backlinks, your internal linking. All these other signals can be more important than just like writing a like super unique content. So what we do is we have a workflow that we basically use all the contents that is already ranking. And from that, we like write our content and we monitor the content for the like 13 days. And after 13 days, when we see like each of these contents are performing better, then we go and add our human touch or add some like manual updates to those contents. So that's the workflow we use for like content generation. And to be like more specific on
Yeah.
exactly what we do, we basically have 1, 2, 3, 4 agents at the moment. One of them is the research and outline agent, which I just told you. This agent is responsible to use the SERP tool and search the keywords we are going to target and see like all the like top ranking results. Using that data, it's going to generate an outline for us. Then from that outline, we are going to write the article. Our article writer is also have access to search tool because sometimes like you want to make sure your writer has also access to like getting the latest information. So we give our writer also access to search tool and like the scraping tools. And then after that, we have an internal linking agent. And my rules for internal linking is always 2 to 5 links maximum. 2 to 4 is my sweet spot, but 5 links is also good. And after that, we just generate the cover and like draft the articles. That's basically the like high overview.
So this is great. Thank you, Merhab. Can you go again from the top? I just wanted to understand, like, like, where does this start again?
I think Cursor just went too deep and
Okay.
basically, used our exact process here. So like we
Workflow.
have
Got it.
all this, yeah. We have like from keyword to article, a URL to article. So sometimes I want to give an article from our competitor here to
Got
just
it.
create a better version of it,
Got
or
it.
I want to just rewrite one of our own articles. So I just
Got it.
put that article here. Another thing we do is like you can add like up to 3 URLs here. So like all those URLs is going to be scraped and then use the content of all those 3 articles to
Got it.
then create a new article. So here, Cursor is basically like talking about the input type.
Got it. That
One
makes
thing we
sense.
have, yeah, one thing we have is a checkbox for outline only, because most of the times, like especially if I'm writing a guest post, I want to like see the outline first, and then like sometimes make some tiny edits, and then tell my agent to, okay, like let's go and write it, instead of like, because
That makes sense.
this workflow takes like up to 2 to 3 minutes to finish.
Got it.
So
I do have a question. I have maybe a couple questions. So you talked about early at some point you talked about freshness or maybe like updating a specific article or and by the way, we're not correct me if I'm wrong, we're not necessarily talking about is it a single article or is it several articles that are, where there's internal linking? Like if you generate an article, where is it going to get those other internal links from is my question.
yeah, that's a good question, because so for internal linking, you basically can do multiple things. One of the old ways that I believe most of the SaaS products are doing right now is they are like scraping all the pages you have,
Yeah.
and then using those pages, they are like embedding those pages, embedding the content of those pages, and then like when they want to look for internal linking opportunities, they are just making a query into their own database in order to find these URLs. But what we are doing is, let me see if I can find it here.
Yeah.
Agent deep dive, I think it's going to be here. So what we are doing is, so we have our internal linking agent, instead of like we store all the URLs of the page, we are using Google itself to tell us what URLs are good for like making an internal link. So
Wow.
basically, what our internal agent does is that, let's say we want to make an internal link for site SEOMode.co. What you can do is basically just type your query here, let's say backlinks or like guest post backlinks, and then Google will return you the like URLs that it thinks it's good, yeah, and it's a good match for this keyword. So
Mm,
then our
got it.
agent goes through just these URLs, like maybe the top 5, in order to see like if it's a good fit to make an internal link or not. So
Got it.
that's how we make the internal links.
Super interesting. Thanks for breaking that down. And then in terms of the freshness, I know that obviously freshness does impact in terms of, both
Yeah.
SEO and GEO. Do you like it sounds like you have a semi-manual approach to this where if an article is maybe ranking well, but maybe it's not performing as well as previously, you're going to be updating it so it's a little bit fresher, and then that's where you put it into this funnel as well, right? Because at some point there was a question
Yeah.
around updating a specific article, right? Or I guess it was at the top maybe.
Yeah. I feel like you're talking about here.
Yeah,
But yeah,
exactly. Yeah, totally.
so the freshness is one of the signals that we talked earlier, one of the like good signals that can actually push your article
Hmm.
into higher rankings. And freshness is one of the things that we are still kind of doing it manually using like Ahref. We are like all the like every week checking which blog posts or which contents are improving in rankings or declining in rankings.
That makes
And
sense.
then we use that data in order to like decide, oh, does this worth, doing a rewrite or not? Because like the problem I faced was, you see lots of the times one of your pages is declining, but that page doesn't necessarily need to be refreshed, like, or it's not that important page. So if you just want to automate that, Claude or like whatever agent you're going to use, they might keep refreshing everything like all the
Right.
time,
Right.
and that might not always work best. So that's the refresh part is one of the parts that we are still doing manually.
So let me just say it back. You're doing it manually because at the end of the day, there is a strategic side to this where it's not about just like refreshing everything. Some of them make
Yeah,
sense. Some others don't necessarily make sense in terms of the lift and the impact it's going to have, basically.
exactly. And there is lots of times that you're ranking for some keywords that you doesn't supposed to rank. So we had a client that was ranking for a specific keyword that was a branded keyword. Like they were on position 9. It wasn't like on top 5, but they were getting like tons of impressions. But with the new Google update, they lost that ranking So like there was no need to actually rewrite that article because like that article doesn't supposed to be like on that position for that specific keyword at the first place.
Got it. That makes sense. Super helpful. All right, this was another great one, Mehrab. Thank you for sharing.
Now that we're still talking about internal linking and like writing the articles, one of the good tactics and easy tactics to do in SEO is the striking distance, which is basically when you have a page that is ranking in position 6 to, let's say, like 15 or 16, which is basically either on page 1, position 6, or on page 2, like all the way down to the page 2. These kind of positions, you can easily like push that a little bit up. So if it's on page 2, you can push that to be on page 1, or if it's on position 6, 7, you can push that to be on top 5 by just doing like some tiny improvements, like adding internal links, updating the content, like content freshness, as you just said, or even sometimes just building a backlink, or sometimes you see like you can just update the title of that content to match that specific keyword you're trying to like rank, and that would be helpful enough to like push you to page 1. So the way we do that at the moment is we use Search Console. And so let me bring this to the original version. So what you want to do is open your Search Console, and I like to add a filter for queries and like disable branded queries. So like select the non-branded queries. So I'm just seeing the pages or queries that are ranking for non-branded queries. And from here, what you wanna do is select this and select 500 results. So you are seeing like all the pages possible. And another thing I like to do is sort this by position. So this is what we would do manually. We would either use Search Console and like sort by position and go through this list manually to see like, okay, like which pages are sitting on like position 5, position 6, or we would use Ahref. But now what we do is we just export this as a CSV, which I exported earlier. And I export, we just need the page.csv. So if you open this file, it has all this data. You just need page.csv. So I already did that and put it here. What you want to do is, again, open Cowork. And one of the reasons I use Cowork more than just normal Claude is that Cowork is better at doing multi-steps agentic works compared to Claude. So we just copy this new prompt that we are going to put on the show notes, put it here, attach this here as well, and hit the send. And then we just wait for Claude to do his magic and give us a priority list on which pages we can improve, we need to improve in order to create either internal linkings, refreshing the content, updating the H2, and like all this kind of stuff.
All right, awesome. This is great. So now we're going to wait for Claude to do its magic, and maybe we'll come back to this when it's done. I know you also wanted to talk about another cool hack, which obviously has a lot of impact on GEO and SEO, which is how to find relevant Reddit threads and how to basically, post content there that's relevant. And you're using Hermes Agent to do this
Yeah,
in an automated way. So would love to dive into that.
yeah, for sure. So as you know, one of the like most cited sources in LLMs, in almost all the LLMs right now, is Reddit. And like following by Reddit is YouTube, and then it's LinkedIn. But by just focusing on Reddit alone, there is tons of opportunities that you can either mention your brand to open your way into like LLM responses, or even sometimes get direct customers directly. It's from doing that.
Mhm.
So one of the new workflows that we are testing right now is using Hermes and another prompt that we have, which is this one, which we just give our website and then our keywords, and then we tell it to use the SERP tool it has.
Maybe just for context for some people. So basically Hermes is basically like a agentic harness that you can use locally typically to be able to run a whole bunch of activities on your device. and you had shared that you're using WSL, right, on your
Yep.
Windows PC here to be
Yep.
able to run Hermes. That makes sense
Yep.
within its own Linux basically instance. That makes sense, or environment.
Yep. Exactly. So Hermes is great for like agenting works, and the reason I'm choosing Hermes over OpenClaw is that it breaks less. Like
Interesting.
anytime I tried to use OpenClaw, there was like some tiny bug here and there. Maybe it was like for my workflow or for my setup on WSL, but for me, like Hermes worked really, really better, and I just enjoyed working with it more.
Just let me ask, would you be able to do the same workflow in Claude Cowork or
Yeah, yeah, for
okay.
sure. Yeah, for
So
sure. You can do
what's the
this.
advantage of doing it in a Hermes versus Claude Cowork?
Yeah, so the thing is, here I'm using our own MCP server to look up
Got
on the
it.
SERP, and because of how we built the like our own APIs at the beginning, I couldn't like configure our MCP server on Cloud. So that's why like we are building a new product just to be like able to provide SEO data and SEO MCP like for all these different agents.
Got it.
But the prompt that is here, you can give it either to Claude, OpenClaw, like any agentic workflow you have.
Got it. Super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and so the only thing you need here is an MCP tool that give you the SERP results. So right now, again, since we have this data, we are using our own MCP, but there is like tons of MCP tools out there that can basically give you SERP results. There is Bright Data, there is Data for SEO. They do have their own MCP server. Ahref, they do have their own MCP server, but I think Ahref does not have a SERP feature. You just can look up on each keywords.
Got it.
But yeah, basically what this prompts does is that again, it opens your website to like look at what is your website. Then it opened it searched these keywords using this query. So it used cite Reddit to just like see Reddit results that are ranking according to Google for these queries. And then from there, it would create a list for you. It would create a CSV file for you that includes all the Reddit threads that you can go and like mention your branding there. And what we do is we basically run this every week. And it's not like that every week is going to be like 2 or 3 new Reddit threads. Lots of the time it's going to be same, especially like the Reddit threads that are ranking on position 1. But it's just good to like run it every week. Make sure if there is a new Reddit thread that you have to be mentioned, you just go there and mention yourself and just make sure like you are being active in Reddit as well.
Super interesting. Great. And so this is something you basically run often for your clients as part of that geo practice?
So this is one of the services that we are still playing around with. Reddit is really hard to like, be consistent in terms
Yeah,
of actually being able to reply and mention.
right.
So this is one of the parts that like we do offer, but we are actually testing it ourselves.
Yeah, and also Reddit is well known for like banning a lot of folks that are
Yeah,
posting and being
exactly.
very careful. So it's not that easy. It sounds easy, but it's not that easy.
Yeah, it is. I'm gonna say it is really hard, especially nowadays. But it's good that it is getting harder because like lots of the low quality spam is going to get like suppressed.
Super interesting. This is great.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I see we also have results from the
yeah,
earlier thread. You want to walk us through it?
yeah, for sure. So as you can see, like now it is giving us a result of all these pages um, for like the striking distance strategy, and you can see it is giving us its reasoning, its position, its priority. And what you want to do here is go through each of these pages one by one. So I like to actually also add a filter here on Search Console as well. So we add a filter here for page, add this page here. Because what I like to see as well is the queries that this page is ranking. So for example, I want to see like which queries is getting the most clicks, which queries is getting the most impressions, but not clicks. So I want to also make sure like, so for example, TradingView API, is it really related? Uh, to this page or not. If it is related and it's getting this amount of impressions but no clicks, then I want to probably rewrite my article or rewrite my title to match that query, right? To improve its position and to improve its CTR. Or trading view, let's see what we have for the clicks. Trading view alert free, another keyword, we are getting lots of clicks. So from here, I would use these queries to either rewrite the article title, put it in the article title, or I would create backlinks, and in the backlinks I'm creating, use this as the anchor text. So in the backlinks, I use these specific keywords to make the anchor text, or I would use this in my internal linking strategy, but again, as my anchor text.
Yeah, this is super interesting. So first of all, how many, like in terms of the results here, how many are we talking? Like that Claude suggested. It looks
Here,
like there's like a 20 or so. Is that it? And
yeah, you go, please.
the priority here is where you should be spending the most time in order to be able to move over that striking distance and maybe ranked, on the first page or
Yeah,
something, correct?
yeah, indeed, indeed. Based on
Makes sense.
what is their positions, and so for example, this one is critical because it's on position 6, on average 6 or close to 7. So it's easier to probably push this page to be on top 5 and improve this page. That's why it is critical.
That makes sense. And another, this touches on a topic you and I have discussed before. I think with SEO, obviously there's a side that you can automate, but you just showed, even though you did automate, this job for Claude, then behind the scenes, you have to go into, comb through this, look at what makes sense, potentially rewrite, potentially have other backlinking into the specific article or something. So there's still a lot of manual work involved and analysis and review, which again goes back to the part, like, so I really appreciate that basically highlighted these 5 hacks to just anybody can do. Anybody can just, you showed us how to do this ourselves and how to, start impacting already the geo that we're seeing for the different apps and companies we're building. But nevertheless, in order to do this day in and day out and see consistent results, it takes a lot of time, right?
Yeah, for sure. Hard part about SEO is that it contains like 10 or 100 different simple parts that if you just mention those parts individually, it looks super simple and super easy. So like, for example, if we just wanted to talk about striking distance, it looks super easy. But when you look at them all together and like all the tiny details you have to check, all the nuances it has, it gets like lots of works and it gets super, super boring. So yeah, you're right. And that's the problem why I still believe, and like many SEOs still believe, like you can't completely automate your SEO. You can like automate lots of boring and hard parts of it. But at the end, the strategy side, and like the double checking side, it needs the manual checking and someone to like do the double checking.
Right. It needs some hand holding and it needs somebody dedicated to work on it day in and day out and make sure you're constantly improving all the different aspects of this, right?
Indeed.
Which is why, again, you even with AI, you have a lot of work on your plate, I know, and folks, unless they have the bandwidth or the resources internally to have somebody full time, working with a partner like you is always super helpful.
Yeah, for sure. We would be grateful to have any like partners and like anyone coming from you. But like as I said, these are things that are super simple. Anyone can do it themselves, or like any internal team can do it
But
themselves.
so Mehrab, where would you recommend? Like we talked about these 5 strategies, would you recommend starting with one of these, or when you typically start with a client, what's typically the approach? I think you typically look at like competitor keywords. Is that what you look at, and then you start, looking at the opportunities there, or what's the process in general?
Yeah. So for me, is the starting point is what I shared with you. If they are their most important thing is GEO. So we'll first look at the prompts. But after that, what I like to do is I like to reverse engineer their competitors, the top competitors in terms of SERP. So lots of the times you might have some big brands as your competitors, but they are not necessarily your competitors in terms of SEO. So what I like to do is find those competitors that are active on SEO, that are ranking in top 5 or even page 1 on the keywords we want to rank, and see what they are exactly doing, what kind of backlinks they have, what type of content they are publishing. Are they doing any PSEO? Are they doing any like bottom of funnel SEO? What is like their go-to SEO strategy? And from there, create a roadmap on like what we have to do, like step by step, what is the priority. And like after that, like we would have a like monthly checking or a weekly checking
Yeah,
on
that makes
these
sense.
kind of stuff. Like our content ranking, is there any position that like we can add some improvements to improve the rankings or these
Yep.
kind of stuff.
Super, super interesting. So, and you had actually mentioned this to me directly that you typically start with geo because with geo you can start having an impact fairly quickly, and
Yeah.
then once you start doing a lot of this infrastructure work on the geo side, and granted you're still tracking basically performance on a weekly basis across all these LLMs, et cetera, to see performance, but then you kind of shift gears back to like more traditional quote unquote SEO, where you look at competitor keywords, SERP, et cetera, and you do the grueling work of improving page by page, getting backlinks, and all that other stuff that SEO is well known for. Right? Is that
Yeah.
a good
Yeah.
summary?
Yeah, exactly. Because, lots of the GEO stuff is, as we said, like find these prompts, either publish a guest post mentioning your brand name or publish it on your own blog post mentioning your brand name as the first. Then going to Reddit, see if there is any Reddit thread. So those kind of stuff are things that you can do pretty fast. And the thing is, in the guest post side, so like for example, this is one of the guest posts we published, and what we are doing here is also creating a backlink to us. So we are also with doing the GEO, like with putting the most focus on the GEO, but we are also doing SEO as well. So we are creating a backlink, we are passing this authority to our website. And that's why like we focus on GEO first, because at the end, like there is ton like it's basically the same, but how you shift your focus and like on what things you put your focus just change the like speed of getting results in like which part of the strategy.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, basically they feed into each other, but the strategy differs a little bit based on off of where you start, basically, which makes sense. This is all super, super helpful, Mehrab. Thank you for sharing. Well, maybe from here, first of all, I love what you also tweet about. These type of concrete, no bullshit strategies that you're sharing here are the type of strategies you share on Twitter. So I highly recommend everybody listen to start following you on Twitter. Maybe you can share your Twitter handle with folks so that they know where to follow you. And I know that maybe they should be following you on LinkedIn as well, or anywhere else. Like where should people basically follow you?
I'm mostly active on X, that's my go-to platform, but I cross-post everything on LinkedIn, Threads, and everywhere else. Yeah, this is Mehrab underline build is my handle, and I feel like Mehrab something HB is my LinkedIn account. I don't
Don't
know,
worry,
like I
we'll,
don't
we'll
check
we'll
the.
share it. We'll share it in the show
Yeah,
notes for sure. But this is really,
yeah.
really helpful. And I guess I like to ask this at the end. If there's one thing you want, like a go-to-market leader or a startup founder to walk away with from this talk, after hearing this episode, what would it be? What's the one kind of takeaway you want them to be able to keep in mind?
I think one thing any GTM engineer needs to know, or any marketer, is the same fact that we talked earlier. The best time to work on GEO and SEO is like yesterday. I'm not saying that because we have an SEO agency. I'm saying that because at the end it's gonna take time. But the kind of leads you can get inbound from LLMs or SEO is like, it is really great. It's really a different type of marketing, and the conversion rates we are seeing from GEO is significantly higher than like traditional SEO. So I feel like if you have the bandwidth to do it, one of the best things you can do is just, even if you can't focus on SEO, just try to apply what we said here and focus on GEO, because it's gonna be worth it.
Super, super interesting. Yeah. I mean, this is obviously a very, very exciting space. There's things changing all the time. So I feel like if we invite you again in 3 months, already a lot of things will have changed. But I think that's really, really great advice. I agree with you. I think that, go-to-market teams are not investing early enough in geo and SEO. I think there's still so many opportunities there. And I can tell you, being more on the sales side of things, for sure, inbound leads are the best kind of leads. People that come in with intent, who've done their research, who've learned about you through different, backlinks and articles, etc., and who come with you warm with a good understanding of how you're different, how you're special, the specific capabilities you have. So fully agree there. Listen, Mehrab, it's been really, really great to have you. Thank you for walking through these 5 hacks on how to impact geo for your business. I'm sure this is going to interest a lot of people. And again, we'll be happy to have you again in the future. And in the meantime, good luck with everything you're doing.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Charles. It was great. I enjoyed my time here and would look forward to our next episode for the next hack.
Definitely. Sounds good. Take care.
Sure. Bye-bye.